Welcome back to Davy Writers. Figuring out your target audience is crucial for tailoring your book's content, style, and marketing strategies to the people most likely to read it and enjoy it.
In today's episode, it's all about identifying your target audience. There are steps and considerations to help you do this, such as defining your purpose for your book, which we discussed in a previous episode.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to get into that because that's basically step one. But before we do that, what is a target audience?
So, the target audience is basically who is your main reader? Who is the person that is going to pick your book up, read it, and then also something really important, are going to recommend it to other people who are within your target audience as well too. So there's so many things to consider when you're looking at a target audience. It's kind of like if you want to sit down and create the perfect person to read your book. You want to look at what are their beliefs, what are their lifestyles, what are their reading habits, where are they reading. Are you targeting people? Is your book like a beach read? Okay, so people are going to read your book while they're on the beach. Well, that means they're probably on vacation. So like, how do you, as that person's getting ready for vacation, why are they picking your book up over the book next to it? Like, how are you marketing and targeting that person to let them know, hey, my book is really great for you to sit on the beach and read? I remember with my book, A Lost Woman, which not a beach read, not a fun read, very dark and heavy. But I was like, I'll know I made it when I see somebody, because I live on the beach. When I see somebody reading my book on the beach and my face is on the back cover, and I can be like, that's me. Do you like my book? And I remember somebody asked me, they're like, well, is your book a beach read? And I was like, no, So I was like, so it didn't really make sense for me to target that type of reader, even though that was kind of the dream I had in my head.
That's so funny. It's like the classic conversation where people are like, well, it applies to everyone. Anyone can read it. Anyone wants this. And everyone does that in every single industry. But the reality is, like, when you narrow it down and you actually have a defined target, you're going to end up reaching those people. But you really have to think about the strategy behind what the purpose of your book is and really who was it created for? Who did you write that for? I've heard one author before where he talked about that when he was writing it, he thought of one specific person the whole time that he envisioned reading it. And I mean, very, very detailed. And then that helped it expand beyond obviously that one person. But in order to do that, you do have to define it. I would say too, one of the biggest things, I mean, just going off of what you said, and I tell this to authors that I work with all the time, is to actually look at similar books in the genre that you want your book to be in or anything like that. Definitely the bestsellers, but actually compare them. Read what other people are writing as well that are in that space.
Yes, if you are not reading in your genre, that is a problem.
It is a huge problem. Yeah. If you say like you want to write a psychological thriller, but you only read contemporary romance, those are very different audiences.
Yes, and it's so important. So with my first book, I did not do any of this, by the way. I had no idea who I was writing this book for. It was for myself. I mean, we've talked about that, how like you write the book for yourself and then you edit the book for your reader. But I didn't even know what genre my book set in when I finished the book. And that made it extremely difficult to query, to sell. Now, with all the knowledge that I have in my profession, looking back on those first days of querying, I was like, well, no wonder nobody, everything was a no, because I didn't even have a clear vision for my book. I didn't have a clear vision as an author. And so an agent couldn't see what I was trying to do with my book. And so they say, no, thank you. So it's really important that go back and listen to our first two episode in this series to really learn what is your book going to do and what is your goal with your book. So define that purpose for that book. Make sure that you're looking at similar genres, right? And you're looking at those books. Where's that target audience? So, like, if I want to sit next to A.R. Torrey, which is a great author that I, idolize because she's got a system down. I mean, she's really working it. Uh, if I want to sit next to her on the shelves, then I want her audience. So where's her audience? How can I get access to her audience? Because it's already done. She's done a lot of hard work, right? I can just kind of jump in there and piggyback off of the audience she's built. Um, Same thing, Colleen Hoover became wildly successful because she had a core following, and those her core followers loved her. And she wrote the same thing over and over again, and that's a really big ticket too. When you are defining your target audience, just keep in mind too, this is your target audience that is going to be for every book, because once you build that audience with book one, you want that to translate to book number two. If book number two is completely different, you're starting all over. You might as well be a debut author. So I have two books and two very complete genres, age groups. Like, one's adult domestic suspense, one is YA fantasy fiction. So it's like very, very different audiences reading those books. I have to market differently for those books. I had to build two different reading groups for those books. So it was double the work. And I know that now. I just didn't
Yeah.
know that when I wrote two very different books.
Well, and on that note, it's not just a matter of like what your audience wants to read by the genre, but then going off of that, where are those authors marketing? Because your marketing strategy afterwards, like we've said time and time again, like you have to talk about your book in order for people to read your book. You can't just expect it to go out there and magically be picked up by people. So when you're reading what other authors are writing in that space, see what their marketing strategy is like too. Where are they in terms of social media? What does their website look like? Do you see that they go to different events and everything? Like, what are they doing? And if they are going to events, what events are they attending? Those are huge things that you can start to plan for that will make the whole process, this mountain that you're climbing, so much easier. Um, Sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Oh, no, I was just at a conference this past weekend, and so much great information at the IBPA Publishing University conference. But there was one where it was all about reaching your readers. And one of the people on the panel basically said, like, and I'm pulling it up right now because it was such great information, but it was like, where is your reader on social media? And it was like, if you are romancy, or I'm going to butcher, it's like romance and fantasy. They've combined the word.
Romantasy.
Romantasy. They
And
have romantasy,
yeah,
crime and mystery, apparently. These are huge on TikTok. So, like, anything fiction really does well on TikTok. If your book is very visual, it's got bright colors, it's got a really great cover, then Instagram is going to be really helpful for you as well too. Instagram is an extremely visual social media. So you have to be, I remember telling my book designer, I was like, I want my cover to be Insta worthy. Like, I really want because you go and you see these influencers, and the covers that show the best are the ones that they're really going to pick and continue to pick and continue to show and talk about. So having that really dynamic color cover is really good when you're going onto Instagram. Or children's books that have really dynamic illustrations, photo books, cookbooks, anything that's like super visual, that you want to be on Instagram, right? Speaking of that, if you are doing food, fashion, that is what people go to Pinterest for that.
hmm
So I did not realize what a search engine and how good Pinterest could be for authors. But I recently had a friend get onto Pinterest with her courses and her nonfiction book, and she is killing it. And so doing very well. And then if you have like, if you're in the journalistic space, or you're writing like really thought-provoking stuff, or, current affairs, Twitter apparently is like the space to be for that.
yeah.
And then they said Reddit's all over the place. I don't have any experience with Reddit. I'm just trying to figure out TikTok. So I'm like, I'm like, don't even put something else on my plate. I am not doing
Not
Reddit
doing that.
at all. But they were like, basically anything You get lots of impressions on Reddit, but very low, like it's not a good place to like really sell your book, is what they said. And
No,
so
because it's mainly for people to go down like rabbit holes. Like, I mean, they're called Reddit rabbit holes for a reason.
yes. And so, but it was really good because it's like, again, it was all about creating that reader persona, right? That very detailed, this is my ideal reader. Okay, where are they on social media? What groups are they on Facebook? Now I know Facebook's apparently for your grandmother, but Facebook groups can actually be a really great place, they said, for authors to go and find like but like I said, find some of your favorite authors in the genre that you're writing in, where they're reading groups. Go be a part of those reading groups. So then when you become an author, they want to support you. The Facebook groups, they said, can be extremely supportive of their community. And so that's something that you want to consider as well, too. And then again, like what do you like to do besides reading? Like if you're doing a beach read, you want to find people who like the beach. So like, where are those people? Maybe not in middle America. Those people
Right.
aren't going to the beach as often as people who live on the coast. And so, or is
But
your
think
reading?
about that too in terms of like timing for your book, what as of us recording this and even with this episode coming out, like we're approaching the summer season too. So like, does that make sense, for timing your book to come out so that you can use that time and space to talk about this new summer read that you have?
Yes. And so, yeah, all that plays into your launch too. Yeah. And marketing and all that kind of stuff. And so definitely. And then I recently was talking to a friend. She's starting a design business. And I was talking to her about this like, okay, well, who is your ultimate client? Like, who would be the best client for you to have? Awesome. Everything you do needs to be targeted towards that community, that type of person. So we always talk about the book is your product. You, as the author, are the business. So sometimes you do have to have that business mindset in order to be successful. So creating that that reader persona is really important to you writing the book. I think that also we talk about trends in reading. Like the romantasy is huge right now. The fantasy bubble is strong. When's it going to burst? But we always say don't sacrifice your book for a trend. That never works.
No.
But being aware of those trends, how they're being so successful, the cycles of trends can be extremely helpful for your book as well, too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Never do something and sacrifice like what you value and what your purpose for that story is. I mean, or any business in that way. But it is helpful to be aware of them, like know what's going on, know what the market does look like. If you did want to write a fantasy book or have been working on one because that is what you're passionate about, then now is a really good time to really buckle down and commit to finishing that. If it's just something that you've always worked on the side, now's your opportunity. Like it's huge. So be aware of them for sure, but don't sacrifice
Hmm.
what you value and what your initial purpose was. That's part of the reason we started talking about that at the beginning, because that's your foundation and it doesn't need to change. But now that we have that, we need to determine who the ideal reader is. And I know we're talking about this in like a 20 to 25-minute conversation, and maybe it sounds really lengthy, but to get started, you could literally sit down and write out your ideal reader. And that is a starting point for determining who your target audience is. You don't have to overcomplicate it, but think about who your ideal reader is that you envision reading this book when it's done.
And you don't have to wait for your book to be out to find that target audience either and to get in with it. Like we said, if you query an agent and you say, look, I have X amount of followers on TikTok that are into romantasies, that's going to be huge. Oh, you already figured out your target audience. You've already targeted them. You've infiltrated their community. And that would go a long way for querying agents to be able to show that you know how to identify a target audience. Not only that, you have access to one. And so, because that to them is just instant sales. And anytime you can show that that you have X amount of sales just in your back pocket, that's going to be huge for the agent, for the publisher, all those as you go through the process.
Yeah, and I would say definitely for traditional, but even if you're going to self-publish it, the sooner you can build those readers and those
Mhm.
followers, truly the smoother the process is going to be when that book launches. Talking about how Facebook groups can be really supportive. I've seen authors that have built successful followings on Book Talk or Bookstagram too that are then self-publishing, and your readers are very supportive of you when you are then launching a book or have another one coming out.
Mhm.
So really think about building a community. And we've talked, we kind of covered, we talked a lot about all the different platforms. You can also just choose one. Like you do not have to be everywhere to do one to have a reach. Do one successfully, commit to one, and that could be really successful for you. You don't have to be on every single social media site that exists for your book to do well.
Some great advice I recently got in terms of marketing your book is make sure you enjoy it. Like, if you don't enjoy, like, I don't enjoy making videos of myself, hearing myself talk, seeing myself. I don't enjoy that. So TikTok is probably not the best space for me because it's going to be torture every time I have to do it. And it really is. Anytime I try to do it, I'm like, oh, this is just awful. I hate making reels. But I really enjoy in-person events. I'm extremely social, very personal. And I will go sit at a coffee shop and love to meet my readers face to face or go to events and have a table and meet people face to face. So I could put more emphasis on doing those because I enjoy it. So the advice was basically like, do if you enjoy it, maybe double down on that and don't kill your soul by trying to make a bunch of reels that you despise too.
No, that's really, really good advice. And just because, if like TikTok isn't for you, which I'm the same way, but there might be another one that is, and then focus on that. I mean, so often I hear people and they're like, well, I just feel like I need to be on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok.
Yeah.
And while we're at it, I should be on Pinterest. And I'm always like, well, okay, do you have the bandwidth to commit to doing all of those? Because all of those have a different strategy. Each
Mhm.
platform, you're going to have a different audience on each platform. You're going to have different strategy, different frequency and content. Can you commit to doing all of that? Then they're like, well, no. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, let's not just do it for the sake of doing it. Let's do it to do it well and do it where you can build a community, whether that's in person or online. And those, your reader audience is going to also be your marketing audience. Like they're gonna kind of walk hand in hand a little bit.
Yeah.
So figuring it out while you're in this writing phase is going to be really helpful once you hit that marketing phase.
Because then your book is going to be written for that person, and that will make a difference at the end of the day. Um, I hear authors a lot say that the first book that they published was not even the first book that they wrote.
Oh, right.
The first book was kind of like trial and error. Like I learned what to do and what not to do, and then they developed kind of a clearer purpose, a tighter target audience as they wrote that second book, and it made a difference. That's the book that got published first because it had a better direction. It had a clear path that it could go down. It wasn't like fighting through the woods trying to figure out like where you're going.
Right. It helps with the whole writing process too. If you know who you're writing to, it's going to help you stay focused, which is one of those key things that we've talked about in these initial, like you're writing your book. What do you need to do? Staying focused can be really, really challenging. There's a lot of different elements that you're trying to weigh in writing this, and knowing who you're writing to is going to be one of those things that helps you stay focused on that.
And also too, when you're writing or when you're reading, how much are you as the reader, think about this, connecting with people in the book. So it's like I really finished that book and I loved it and I recommended it because I connected with that main character. She's a stay-at-home mom. She's bored. And so she's looking through her window, watching her neighbors and sees a murder. And then, that's the whole story of her trying to solve this murder, right? Stay-at-home moms are going to connect with that. So like potentially that's your target audience is bored stay-at-home moms. So, what are they doing? What are they going to be drawn into this book about? Um, Also too, I recently had a submission and it was about a woman who's 50, just retired to 30A over here. It's a really pretty beach. And she finds a body and she's always kind of like had this detective mindset. And then as I'm reading her bio, the author's bio, I'm like, oh, this is you. You wrote about you. Okay. You're the main character. Cause she's like, I'm 50. I just retired on 30A. I've always liked crime books. And I'm like, okay. So you just decided to write like a little novel about yourself. But in doing that, it's very clear who that target audience is. And
Yeah,
it's going to be very easy for her to find that target audience and connect with them because she understands them. And so that can be a big thing too. We have an author coming up at the end of this series, Jenny, and she was a high school theater coach or teacher. And so when she writes her YA thriller book, she's like, I hear the teenage voices in my head because I hear them all day long when I was teaching. And so that's how she's able to write in that genre so well, is because she's so connected to that target audience. So think about those things too when you're getting your book ready. If you're like, okay, I can have a character that does A or B, well, in terms of my target audience, what's going to sell better? How am I going to get that audience to connect more with character A or with character B?
absolutely. All right. So, on that note, whether you're on page one, midway through, or you have that manuscript, but you're going through some editing before you're going to query, because remember, we're not just going to write it and then ship it off. We're going to go back and review it. So, no matter what phase you are in your writing, think about who your target audience is. Who is your ideal reader? What do they look like? What are their interests? What do they do for fun? Think about all of those things. Do some research on your genre and the target audience. Look at some other authors that are doing really well in that space and begin to identify those and make sure that yours is also in line with those different things. And then coming up, as Anne just mentioned, so at the end of the series, Jenny Meyer-Stain is going to join us, which is amazing. It's a great episode. Please, please, please tune in.
She's
And
absolutely wonderful.
she's great. She's a fantastic speaker as well. Really, really love the advice that she always gives. I always learn something new from her, which is great. And next week, before that happens, we're talking about creating your author vision. So, creating a vision for your career as an author, putting all these puzzle pieces together. All of that is coming up on Debut Writers.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Debut Writers. Make sure to check out our newsletter for your 3 T's and subscribe to never miss an empowering conversation.
Stay inspired and keep writing.